please help me welcome someone that I adore greatly in this world, and I'm proud to call her a friend, Kari Anderson, CEO of Say It Better. Take it away. You sit here.
Thank you very much. I'm really excited in this next conversation because it's such a great follow-up on Anil. I'm going to be interviewing Scott Hebner, who's the Vice President of Social Business, about his view about where big data is going and how to make it meaningful.
Right,
and I believe Scott's right behind me, so coming out here. Good. Thank you. Anyway, I was going to say, speaking of businesses working, I wanted to ask you, it used to be businesses thriving. And what's it take to survive now from your big picture view on data? Just give me some insights on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think, if you look back 100 years, there's been one principle and one underlying purpose for a business, and that has been to lower the cost of a transaction. That's why businesses were organized. I would submit that today, there's two overriding principles or objectives that organizations need to move to. One is this notion of becoming a center of expertise based on collective knowledge, not just knowledge within the organization, but out in the marketplace. This fusing of marketplaces and workplaces. Then the second principle is all about reputation, authenticity, and transparency. In today's world of exploding information, attention is a scarcity, right? And to get people's attention, you have to have reputation, authenticity, and you got to be transparent. And so those two principles are overriding the historical focus on lowering cost, and that's been the big change, really.
And I think for many people here that resonates. If we could get concrete, tell me some examples. If you have an example of where it's been meaningfully used in an organization.
Yeah, actually, there's been a great example that has just been talked a lot about recently. It's Boston's Children's Hospital, and they set on a mission worldwide to lower the mortality rates of infants in pediatrics. And they created an organization called Open Pediatrics, which was designed to lower the mortality rate, particularly in developing countries. And they formed this organization, created a social learning platform that now has over 1,000 doctors, pediatric doctors across the world, 70 different countries, ranging from the United States to Europe, to Egypt, for example. And what they've been able to do just recently, actually, was save a child over in the Middle East, due to the ability for these doctors to learn from others that had very similar situations with children, and to learn from the collective knowledge, the actual data, and the procedures, and all the details of what one doctor did somewhere else, and be able to do that almost overnight. If you think about that, it used to be, you gotta pick up the phone, you gotta travel. Now they could do it in real time on a thriving community of interaction, which essentially is collective knowledge and expertise.
So I think one of the things that's underlying that is the notion that, is this working? No?
Whoa.
Everybody wake up? Sorry. We're talking about companies, going back to what Brian said in the introduction, making holistic change overall using some of these tools. So knowing that, what are some of the pitfalls to avoid if someone's going to be using data in a meaningful way? Are there any ideas you have about that?
Yeah, you bring up a good point, which is, if you think about a social business and social media in general, it's a conduit to data. One, it collects data on people and behaviors, but the trick is, what do you do with that data? And I think one of the big pitfalls is to get lost in all the data, right? And to be sent off on tangents in directions that maybe aren't the best for your client or for your business. So the ability to analyze that data very, very specifically and be able to understand, for example, in the case of a doctor, by looking at a set of photographs, MRI, for example, and doing deep data analysis that computers can now do because they're cognitive, they can see microscopic changes in some sort of, say, cancer that the human eye could not see, and that in the past they were unable to detect. So harnessing all that data, in this case, images, right, and being able to do the analysis on it is a good example of, really focusing on the sea of data that's out there.
And I remember too, when we were talking backstage, I think we're echoing a bit, so I'm going to try to talk lower. You're talking about personality. And I know, Brian, we talked about how to make it personal. And how to understand and sense people better. And the age of context has come out and so on. What are some of your notions about how to detect behavior, the senses?
Yep.
Are you doing anything in that area?
Yeah, no, absolutely. In fact, we have a great, can you all hear me? Yeah, okay. A great customer example of this is XO Communications. You all have cell phones and use telecommunications pretty much every minute of the day, at least I do. And there's a lot of churn in that business, and the ability to hold on to customers is very, very important to those businesses. And the way to do that is to understand deeply what the challenges are and what the feelings and the sentiment is for each individual client. And to be able to predict ahead of time that someone's unhappy and engage with them ahead of time. Most of the time they're reactive, right? And I think it's a great example of digging into someone's personality. Now, I think what we have with today's social media is really about purchasing behaviors and based on actions that people have taken in the past, right? Where this is all heading, though, is the ability for cognitive computers to actually predict personality, right? The personality traits like, are you angry? Do you like playing in traffic? You're an aggressive kind of risk taker. You like to sleep a lot, right? Getting at those kind of personality traits to complement the purchasing behavior traits will allow businesses to be able to react better. And again, that goes right to the core of this, which is data is the next natural resource, right? We used to have electricity and hydrocarbons and steam power. It's data and the ability to leverage data that's going to really power a business going forward.
How many of you read the New York Times article about call centers and detecting emotion? Did anybody read that? If you haven't, I really suggest it because they show how far we've come and not come, and the issues of privacy that are related to that. So I want to cover another example. You talked about playing in the street and so on. There was a study I remember that IBM did with cars.com. What kind of specific behaviors do they detect that help them better serve the people in their community?
Right, well, cars.com is actually a great example because obviously they're an online business for reselling cars. And what they've been able to do is create these massive communities, not only that connect the people that are searching for, selling, and buying automobiles, but also the employees of the business. And through that, they've been able to collect an enormous amount of intelligence, of data, that they're then able to mine into people's personalities and to better understand not only purchasing characteristics, but the desires and characteristics of a personality so that they can better provide services to them. And the trick with cars.com is their marketing tactics are actually perceived not as a hindrance, but it's perceived as a service to the customer. And if you're a marketing professional, that's a huge change because most people hate marketing, get in marketing too. When you start to perceive that as an actual service that's benefiting me, you hit the right chord. And you can only do that if you're able to personalize how you talk to someone and not market to segments, which most people do these days.
And he was talking backstage with me about some of the behaviors, like do you play in the street a lot? Do you drive cars too fast? So again, it goes back to that interesting notion of the smarter data gets, and it knows things before we may even consciously be aware of things, where the privacy concerns, but also what kind of competition is going to happen because big data has become such a big tool. So going on from that, if you were to make some predictions about the future and where the competition is going to go and any trends you see, I'm curious about big data, keeping it a meaningful level for business people. What should they be looking out for?
Well, I think this is going to get incredibly fascinating. If you look at social media, what it's done is it's amplified the innate characteristics of all human beings to want to connect with each other, to engage, to share knowledge, to share experiences. It's changed humanity in the way that we can all work together. The next phase of this is going to be all about amplifying the senses that we all have. The ability to hear, the ability to see, the ability to taste, the ability to do the basic senses that we all have, because the brain only has so much bandwidth. So when a baby is crying, right, do you know why the baby is crying? Well, there's technology out there now in IBM research that by analyzing babies crying and building a database and what the outcome has been, they're actually able to predict through like a cell phone or a baby monitor why your baby is crying. Or if you're a firefighter going into a fire and you know someone's in there but you can't hear them because there's so much noise with the fire, be able to cut through all that noise and only hear someone breathing because it cuts all of it out.
Wow.
That is an example of real deep cognitive analytics. Computers in the old days were tabulative. They added things up. Today, they're programmed, right? They're programs. It's the left side of the brain, right? It's organization, it's logic. The computer of the future is going to be cognitive. It's going to be the right side of the brain, right? Which is creative. It's able to be curious. It's learning machines, and to learn how a baby cries, why the baby's crying, or where that kid is in that fire, because you can hear the breathing. It gets down to that learning ability that can be based off all this data. So if today social media is bringing people together, right, the next phase is going to be to amplify our innate senses, because again, the brain only has so much bandwidth. A computer can help supplement that. And when I say computer, I mean our iPhones, our cell phones, not huge, massive computers, but everyday devices.
I'm the journalist who's been dipped into social media and learned so much from so many people in this room. I guess I go back to this notion. We're getting increasingly siloed in some ways as we're getting more connected. So if you're giving advice to the business people in the C-suite that are not involved in social, as they try to process this, what are some of the key decisions they have to make sure they're getting the right technology to develop the right kind of data for purposes? How would you give them advice if you only had 2 minutes?
2 minutes and 22 seconds.
Yes.
I would say it all starts with the ability to collect knowledge. And in fact, we just came out with 2 weeks ago, one of our C-suite studies that IBM does, 4,100 in-person interviews of C-suite, CMOs, CFOs, CXOs, the whole spectrum. And the findings basically say that the C-suite is looking to become a customer-activated enterprise. What does that mean? Complete transparency, opening up the organization completely to each other and breaking down those barriers, but more importantly, bringing the whole community of clients and prospects into the organization. Because today there's a big barrier between employees, marketplaces and workplaces, and there's barriers in a workplace. The way you're going to get value in the future is bring that all together in a transparent way to create the data, because of all the human interactions and all the knowledge that gets created and the expertise that's able to be identified, and then mine that data to actually make better decisions.
I will say Eric Openshaw at Deloitte wrote a paper called Talent Enabled Ecosystem, how you can take data inside and outside the organization so you leverage all the key stakeholders. I know Brian Kramer has been saying some of the same things to do it. But drilling down, what are the questions that the C-suite should be asking to bring in people with the right kind of social business software to engage those people in apt ways? Are there any guides you could give them? Yeah,
and I think it starts with the notion that there's a new type of consumer, there's a new way to work, they're fusing together. So marketplaces and workplaces are coming together. 4 key capabilities that an organization needs to build out. One is the ability to personalize the experience for their workers and for the actual consumer. One-on-one, not marketing to segments. 2, collective knowledge. How do you create collective knowledge inside and outside the organization and be able to capture that knowledge and analyze it? 3, collaborative networking. That's probably where they're furthest along here, right? Get people talking with each other, sharing experiences. Make it easy for me to identify an expert, like right this second, for something I need, where in the past it would take days if you're lucky. And then finally, it all comes down to, in the end, the ability to analytically listen to what that data is telling you. There's more data, by the way, created in the last 2 days than there was in the last 10 years. How do you sift through all that? That's the defining challenge for all organizations going forward.
I guess as every one of you here, you're thinking specifically, how do I choose the technology that does these 4 capabilities? How do I find the right experts to turn to? I think there's some other speakers coming up later today and tomorrow. We're going to go into what Scott was talking about as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
I appreciate this.
Appreciate being here.
Yeah.
You bet.
Take care. Thank you.
Thank you.